Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Pod Smash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer.
We're your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are using Marvel's Avengers, Square Enix's Avengers game that's coming out this week in order to, as an excuse to talk about superheroes and video games. So that is our conversation topic tonight. And so we'll kind of be breaking down like why superheroes and video games work so well together, or how they may not work so well together in some cases. So we'll be kind of breaking down. It's kind of its own subgenre of video games. It's not quite like a big enough genre to be considered a deep dive, because almost all superhero video games also are attached to like a different genre, but it's kind of its own like flavor of video games, and it's just all over the place. So we wanted
superheroes
to
are everywhere. It's like zombie games.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
over the place.
Yep. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And before we get into that, we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are we drinking tonight?
I am drinking from the Aslan Beer Company a beer called Rocket Surgery. Now, would you take your guess as to who that benefits from my week that I have had, why I would want to choose a beer called Rocket Surgery?
Okay, because you had a very particular kind of surgery.
On a rocket. And that is where we will leave it as a family-friendly podcast.
I see what you did
get it?
there.
That was a funny dad joke. It is a double dry hopped double IPA, and there's no description on the can, but there is notes on beeradvocate.com for it. So our newest double IPA recipe is aromatic AF, resin. I don't even know how to say this. Resinous, I guess, like resinous, fresh crushed pine, tangerine, and pomelo on the nose. A dry hop of Citra, Matueka, Sabro, and Wymalens, notes of citrus, tangerine, stone fruit, and pine. I have no idea what half those words are or how to pronounce them, but it is very, very piney, it's very fruity, and it is very IPA, and it is right up my alley, and I would rate this like a 4.5 out of 5. It is amazing.
Nice.
So,
I'm
double
drinking
IPA.
My last Rider number 8 that we got from Aldi that actually turned out to be decent. So, yeah, that's what I'm drinking.
Nice.
The only thing is I have left in my fridge, so you might hear this in the next 2 weeks, is that the last of that like no carb, low cal cider that was basically just like apple flavored water with a tinge of alcohol in it. That was just kind of like meh. And then I also have an actual hard seltzer. So that might be what I have for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's what we're drinking. So let's go ahead and jump right into news, because we have a lot to talk about this week. Things have been happening. Some great cool things and some not so great cool things, but
that is true. We have we're going to end on the bad news, by the way, the order that we have this in. But that's okay.
Damn.
So last week we had mentioned that there was a state of play that had happened more than a week ago, and we never really had a chance to discuss or run down the stuff that was in the state of play. There wasn't a whole lot in there that spoke to us. And again, as independent podcasters who don't have any stake in the game industry or journalism,
Genshin Impact looks sweet.
We don't have to talk about things we don't care about. So I apologize for you guys if there's something you want us to hear about or you want to hear about from us. That's your chance to go tell us that you want to hear about those things, and we'll do it for you. But no one's telling us what to report on. So the State of Play had a whole bunch of announcements. And as you mentioned, Genshin Impact hits PlayStation 4 this fall. And that is an anime RPG. Looks awesome.
It looks.
I think they compared it to
people are
like
comparing
Horizon
it to
Zero Dawn and
Breath of the Wild is the most obvious comparison, because visually it looks like Breath of the Wild. So much so that when the game was, there was like an E3 a couple years ago where the game was being showcased or something like that, and people were protesting it because they thought it was a Breath of the Wild ripoff. Or people were like protesting it because they were like, this is a Breath of the Wild ripoff. I can't imagine that those protests were taken very seriously, nor did those protests reflect the actual mainstream opinion of Genshin Impact. But nevertheless, it is a thing, apparently. People don't. Some people, probably a small faction of loud internet people are like, this is a ripoff. But it looks nothing like Breath of the Wild from an actual gameplay perspective, so I don't know what they're smoking. So
I just now looking through the blog announcement, which you guys could go check out, the PR release, the press release for this, it's co-op. like 4-player co-op.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It looks awesome.
That's amazing.
I know. I read
now
about it.
I'm
It's pretty
interested.
Cool. Genshin Impact. It was sweet. But
Genshin Impact looks great. The biggest hit of news that we wanted to get through regarding the state of play was the Godfall details. Godfall being a PlayStation 5. I'm speculating it's going to be a launch title. It's not confirmed, but Termite says Godfall is going to be a launch title for PlayStation 5. And the highlight of this, they showed a whole bunch of new gameplay, but they took a deep dive into the combat and how weapons work. And it's very Monster Hunter-esque, as there's 4 different weapons, and they all behave differently. Every single one of the 4 classes have a shield as well that like comes up out of their arm. It's really strange. It almost looks like it was like
God of War.
Bracelet.
That's what God of War
I guess.
too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Kratos.
Thank
you.
I knew there's like I've seen this before.
Yeah.
So there's dual blades, which, as the name suggests, are a pair of light, agile weapons, excellent for making quick work of soft, vulnerable opponents. You can combo quick slashes with 4 consecutive light strikes, or light attacks, or a hard hit with a heavy blade, a cyclone. So there's like each of the 4 classes have these different abilities that you can do, which I'm already looking at this and saying, oh, that's the stuff they're going to change based on gear. So you get certain weapons. I'm sure they'll adjust some of the gameplay mechanics based on your builds and your skill trees and those things, which they did not go into. The second one is the longsword, a balanced, versatile weapon for a wide variety of enemies. Not unlike the dual blades, the longsword can also string together 4 light attacks and stands out with a heavy attack finisher to put a devastating exclamation point at the end of a combo. And then there is where's the rest of them?
It's spear, warhammer.
That's it. It was a
great
huge
sword.
warhammer.
Yeah, and then there was one more, but I don't remember what it was. Anyways, it looks good. Looks fun. One of the more interesting announcements they made is that they're not. The game does, at least from what it seems like, they're not trying to make it like a games as a service. It's like you're going to get the complete game. There's not going to be any content that you have to wait for. It's just going to be a complete experience out of the box in and of itself, which is very refreshing for a looter game. Like I'm sure they have the potential of doing DLCs for it, since it is Gearbox that's publishing it, but nevertheless it seems like Counterplay statement implied that it's just going to be an out of the box experience. When you're done with it, you're done with it. Maybe there'll be some end game grindy pieces, but it doesn't look like they're trying to make it something that it shouldn't necessarily be, or that they're not trying to compete in the Destiny space or anything like that. So
one of the things that really appealed to me, it sounded almost like Doom Eternal. The combat philosophy, one of the developers was talking during this presentation, was like fluid dynamic offense all over defense in every situation, and then always moving, closing your gap, and you're rewarded for being aggressive. Which to me sounds like very much like Doom.
Exactly, as opposed to not Godfall, like Dark Souls, where you're rewarded for being defensive. You know, you want to dodge or parry. You can dodge and parry in this game, but it seems like when you can attack, you're going to want to attack, and dodging and parrying is going to be like when you mess up or something like that. So it's kind of cool. Anyways, so that's enough about that. It looks good. I am intrigued. I want to play it for my
I'm very interested in this. This sounds amazing. It's Borderlands and like God of War combined
like
together.
Monster Hunter. Yeah, like Borderlands and Monster Hunter is kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah, exactly. With a little bit of a Dark Souls flavor on it too. So all right, cool. The other announcement of kind of games that are coming out that has been announced. Sucker Punch and PlayStation announced today that there will be a free update to Ghost of Tsushima this fall. They will be adding a multiplayer mode, and it will be called Ghost of Tsushima Legends. And it's going to be a multiplayer, 2-player co-op or 4-player co-op mode, where you will, in the 2-player mode, you'll like do story missions. That will introduce you to, you play as like 4 legendary samurai in Tsushima's history. So it has nothing to do, in no way is it connected to the main game. But the engine and the gameplay will be the same. But you'll basically pick like out of 4 potential samurai classes or whatever. There's the samurai, who I'm presuming will be like all up in your face, like doing the standoff and stuff like that.
Rage tank.
Yeah, exactly. There's the honorable rage tank. There's the hunter, which will probably be the best archer, utilizing the bow mechanics and range mechanics of the game. There's the Ronin and the assassin. I'm guessing the assassin will probably be the stealth kills, and then the Ronin will be like the ghost weapons, maybe have access.
Yeah, it's hard to distinguish that,
right? Because in the game, the Ronin is the Ronin armor is the one that does best for melee stealth. So like sneaking up people and stabbing them in the back, and then there's the Kensi armor or something like that, and that's that's like, it looks like a Ronin armor, but it's enhances your ghost weapons. But to me, assassin sounds like sneaking up and stabbing someone in the throat kind of deal. But I don't know.
It's
either way,
interesting.
There'll be like
we'll see.
for the 4-player co-op, there'll be like a wave based, like fighting off waves and hordes of Mongols, and then there's also going to be 4-player raid. A 4-player raid will be added to the game after the initial launch of the multiplayer mode. So sounds like pretty fun, promising multiplayer coming out of like from no one expected this. Like Ghost of Tsushima was kind of shipped and billed as a game that would just be kind of its own experience, out of the box single player game, open world, and you complete the story and that's it. I didn't expect any post game content or anything like that from it, so that's kind of cool that they've decided to add that. And the best part is it's free. It's not a whole separate game. It's just it's going to be part of Ghost of Tsushima, and early adopters, or I don't know about early adopters or just anyone, but it comes with the game, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, and it says Legends is haunting and fantastical, with locations and enemies inspired by Japanese folk tales and mythology, and an emphasis on cooperative combat and action. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, whereas like the base game was more focused on the like historical, more so historical than the mythological. It's kind of cool that there's going to be supernatural elements in the game.
I didn't even realize until you said it, there is a difference between 2 players and 4 players. With 2 players, you'll be able to play a series of co-op story missions that escalate in difficulty, building on the foundation of combat from the single-player campaign, but with new magical twists that often require careful synchronization with your partner. So that's 2 players. And then the 4-player mode is what you talked about. We have wave-based survival missions, fighting in groups of the toughest enemies that Tsushima has to offer. And then the raids will be added later. So I didn't realize that there's 2 aspects to this, depending on how many people you have playing with you.
Yep. Cool.
It's awesome. I'm excited. I don't even know when this is coming, but
I'm very cool sound. Like, talking right off the bat here about 2 games that I'm like now more excited about than I was. No, I mean, I was excited about Ghost of Tsushima. I platinumed it, but I'm excited. So anyways, let's move on to our last piece of news, because this is the big one that probably will like boot one of our segments if we talk about it too much. So let's try to give us enough time for it as we can.
All right. So the idea here is Epic's Fortnite removed from App Store after it dodges Apple's rules on direct payments. And there was this video that was used as like propaganda. And so I'm going to read from gamesindustry.biz, Rebecca Valentine. I follow her on Twitter. She's been on multiple podcasts that I listen to. She's great. So I'm going to read the synopsis of her original story of what happened, just kind of what's going on. And then we'll talk about that afterwards. The original story: Fortnite has been removed from iOS App Store today by Apple in response to developer Epic Games implementing direct payments in the game to skirt Apple's platform fees. In an announcement this morning, Epic Games implemented permanent discounts on Fortnite's in-game V-Bucks currency across all platforms. They basically lowered the price from $9.99 to $7.99 to avoid the platform fees if you use Epic Direct Payment. That was me talking, not the article. The game pricing discount was also offered to users making purchases on PC and consoles. However, just a few hours later, Apple has removed Fortnite from its App Store, offering the following statement. So this is what Apple said. Today, Epic Games took the unfortunate step of violating the App Store guidelines that are applied equally to every developer and designed to keep our store safe for our users. As a result, their Fortnite app has been removed from the store. Epic enabled a feature in its app which was not reviewed or approved by Apple. They did so with the express intent of violating the App Store guidelines regarding in-app payments that apply to every developer who sells digital goods or services. Epic has had apps on the App Store for a decade and have benefited from the App Store ecosystem, including its tools, testing, and distribution that Apple provides to all developers. Epic agreed to the App Store terms and guidelines freely, and we're glad they've built such a successful business on the App Store. The fact that their business interests now lead them to push for a special arrangement does not change the fact that these guidelines create a level playing field for all developers and make the store safe for all users. We will make every effort to work with Epic to resolve these violations so they can return Fortnite to the App Store. That's what Apple said. Apple's 30% price cut has not been applied uniformly in the past. While games on the App Store are not permitted to skirt it, Amazon Prime Video, for instance, can, and other major apps such as Netflix and Spotify simply get around it by not selling subscriptions through the store. You can use the app on mobile if you pay via the company's website. Whew. So
you don't have to read the article now because Termite did it.
Well, that's only like halfway. That's like the top third. So it goes on, and there's more. I just wanted to like get the what happened out there for you guys that are listening.
Yeah. So if you want a summary, basically, Fortnite, I was gonna say Epic tried to like undercut Apple by like making it so that you could avoid buying the currency through the App Store and instead make payments directly through the game or whatever. And then they offered discounts to that in-game payment. So Apple said that violated their terms of use, so the game got canned, pretty much. Those two have kind of gone to war, as Termite mentioned before. There was also a video that Fortnite released like a day afterwards that was like, or Epic released afterwards, that was a spoof on the 1984 Apple commercial, which a lot of younger listeners and a lot of younger Fortnite players probably don't get the reference, but it's a reference to an Apple commercial from 1984 where they were comparing IBM to Big Brother and saying that Apple is the one who will free us from the oppressive IBM. And so Epic has turned that classic commercial on its head and said, Fortnite, Epic will free us from Apple. But the same author, I think you linked, had a good breakdown of that commercial as to like why Epic kind of missed the point of the original commercial. Like, again, the point of the original commercial was to sell Apple computers. The point of this is to like incite the players against Apple, which is kind of not necessarily what, it's kind of antithetical to the point Apple was trying to make originally. So either way, it still is like crazy drama. Like, there's no way that Fortnite put that video together in a day. Like, they had that ready.
Oh yeah, they had this
knew.
Planned.
They knew. Yeah. They're doing what they're doing specifically to challenge Apple's policies. So yeah, big drama. I mean, we had talked last week, I think, about the Microsoft's app getting pulled from the App Store. So Microsoft's now engaged in a gaming war, as it were, with Apple, and now so is Epic Games. So
and Facebook too. There was an issue with Facebook having its gaming stuff. And I don't know a whole lot about what's going on between Facebook and Apple. I just know that it's wrapped up in this too.
Yeah,
like,
so
it's three
it seems
different
like
companies that are all attacking Apple right now.
Yeah, and none of them are good guys.
That's the funny part.
Heroes. Yeah, this is a story with no heroes. We sit back and
watch these, like, the richest companies in America, like, go to war over each other, over games and media and stuff.
Over who gets to make the most money. You know what I mean? Like, who gets to hold the monopoly? And the rest of us are all just sitting here like, I don't like any of you. So.
Right? Yeah. So we're all sitting back eating our popcorn, watching what's going on. I do want to talk about what Tim Sweeney has said, at least to shed some light on why Epic has done this, because we haven't talked about this yet. Apple has gone crazy, wrote Epic CEO Tim Sweeney in a tweet. If colleges hold virtual classes through an iPhone app, Apple could demand 30% of the tuition. Truly, Apple has no right to take any percent of any company's revenue just because they made the phone people use to access the stuff. If Apple had the way, they'd block the web and make arbitrary decisions about what pages you're allowed to visit, and then demand 30% of the revenue from every company that does business on the web. So that's like that's the worst scenario, right? Hypothetical, like that's the worst case scenario. But it makes him sound like he's being altruistic and like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love how Tim Sweeney and Epic in general just have this like white knight mentality. Like, they're these heroes who are like saving the gaming industry from all of the evils of big business, as if they don't also have shareholders to please, as if Tencent doesn't own 40% of their you know what I mean? Like as if they aren't also engaged in shady business practices, and as if they were the monopoly holders, they would not be doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't care for Epic's virtue signaling in this case, but I get their point. They aren't. He's not wrong. You know, Apple is exploiting basically their own stranglehold over the industry, just the smartphone industry and everything like that. But to pretend like I don't know. I don't have a high opinion of Epic in the first place. Although I did see an article that was saying like this does bring into question whether or not whether or not developers will be able to actually utilize Unreal to make iOS games. Epic could basically decide, they could fire back by saying like, nope, we're not going to license out any Unreal engines to anyone who's going to try to develop games for iOS. It's like, ooh, man, this is getting real.
Yeah, App Store players in the last 30 days spent $43.4 million on Fortnite. So I guess just in the 1/3 of our pandemic, $43 million through the App Store went to Fortnite. And if Apple gets 30% of that, that's 15 ish, rounding $15 million went to Apple. But you think about the revenue that Epic is shooting themselves in the foot and doing this. I mean, it's a $1.2 billion revenue stream in general from the App Store every year. So if they generally make $1.2 billion, a year from the App Store alone, that's quite a lot of dough.
Yeah, no one
is losing.
No one really benefits.
Up.
Yeah, no one benefits from this. Apple Fortnite fans don't benefit from this. Apple doesn't benefit from this. Like, this is just two giants tearing at each other's flesh, cutting each other off at the legs. So we'll see who comes out on top. And I think that it's a really interesting story because it has huge implications for like storefronts and app-based gaming and mobile gaming and gaming in general, like platform holders versus developers and all that stuff. Like it's going to the legal decisions that come out of the courts on this are going to have, this is probably going to end up going to the Supreme Court just because of how both companies can afford the lawyers to continue to, you know what I mean, to
Good
appeal
segue that this Epic Games has actually filed a complaint against Apple in the U.S. District Court of California. So you said Supreme Court is the end goal, probably, but right now it's in the District Court of California. And the complaint is Epic is accusing Apple of an anti-competitive conduct by forcing developers to lose a 30% cut to its store and use Apple's in-app payment options, as well as suffering little or not at all from potential competitors, since, quote, mobile device customers face significant switching costs and lock into the Apple iOS ecosystem, which serves to perpetuate Apple's substantial market power. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like...
Right. They're also, apparently they also have retaliated. Apple has retaliated by removing all of their development tools, like licensing
okay, so
from
that
the
was
development
new
tools.
After all that.
Like
that actually came out today. So this all hit the fan on the 13th of August. Today is the 17th. And so 4 days later, I'm glad you brought that up because now Apple is going one step farther and is removing, like you said, it could affect Unreal devs, but all of the SDK, everything that Apple allows. And that's actually, I got into a debate at work on Friday with someone over this who is a super Apple, like he buys stock in Apple. His son works for Apple. He is all in. He loves Apple. He lives and breathes Apple. And I said, the reason I never ever got into Apple as a programmer and as a gamer was because their Macintosh computers were not customizable with any of the hardware that gamers used. So I couldn't go buy a video card or RAM or like a processor and upgrade. Like I had to go through Apple. But then the drivers don't support the games. So I can't use like the latest and greatest. Games aren't supported on the Mac. So I had to build my own computer and use Microsoft Windows. And then when it comes to phones, you have to buy expensive iPhones and all of the apps run natively on it. And I can't like do anything on my phone. At the time I was a tinkerer, so I wanted to like mess with the phones and have control over what I store on the phone, files, downloads, shares, etc. I couldn't do any of that on an iPhone. And then as a developer, if you wanted to make an app for the iPhone or iPad, you had to go buy the SDK and the license for it versus Android, where I can just like write a program today on C++ and just upload it to compile it on the Android SDK and I'm good to go. And I don't even have to use C++. I can use whatever language I want. So like I got into a whole debate. Like Apple is so controlling. Yeah. But then I very quickly realized how Apple is the Nintendo of the phone and technology world, where old school Nintendo anyway, because like old school Nintendo forced all game developers to buy all of the hardware from them in order to put their games on their chips. And like, you want to make a Super Nintendo game, you got to buy all the cartridges from Nintendo to work with the Super Nintendo. Anyway, I go on a tangent there. But yes, so there was a thing today that came out where Apple is now targeting the source development kit licenses for all of Epic as a company. And they're like removing themselves entirely and like separating. So
we'll probably stop there, but this is an ongoing story. It's an ongoing kind of conflict, and it very well may end up, as if it continues to get more and more juicy, as so to speak. It very, very well may warrant its own 80-bit Pod Smash bonus episode, and then we can really break down our opinions and thoughts on it. But we do have superheroes to talk about, so giant tech companies going head to head and fighting, bringing each other down in order to try to get more of our money may not be our favorite thing, but
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Favorite things.
Yeah, I don't know why I decided to like add a stutter into it. So
yeah, you just did that.
By no means,
I was there. I'm here for it. I got you.
By no means to make fun of or be hurtful to anyone who has a stutter in real life. I actually do stutter, so I guess
think that was the case, but now that you mentioned it, now it is the case.
So okay, I do stutter, so I am of that affliction, I guess, so I can make fun of myself, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Let's I'm a victim too, Danny. Okay, so Favorite Things is a segment of our show where we share with you something that we're excited about, something that has inspired us or excited us this week in order that you may find your next favorite thing. By the way, I have some feedback on Favorite Things from a listener who said that if the intention of Favorite Things is to share with someone can also experience, then we need to tone down the like super personal stories, because there's no way, as he put it, there's no way I will be able to recreate that day you had on the river with your wife and your son. So,
right.
Whatever.
Is that the intention of Favorite Things, though?
I think it would be nice to try, at least distinguish which favorite things are ones that are intended to be shared and which ones are not intended to be shared. So as in like, you could go out and do this. I think I've started that precedent recently by saying like, this is one that is a suggestion or whatever. Yeah. But anyways, so I will start. And with that in mind, I will actually then immediately counter the feedback that was given and say that my dog's breath is my favorite thing.
Sounds hot.
A little bit of history. My dog, it just has the worst breath. But I took him to the vet as for his checkup, and the vet was like, well, we definitely need to do a teeth cleaning. But what I noticed was I found that your dog has a heart murmur, and I rate my heart murmurs on a scale of 1 to 6. I don't know why he just doesn't do 1 to 5, but he's the professional, so I'll trust his judgment. And he said that my dog has a 4 out of 6 heart murmur. So he was like, I think it's because the bacteria from your dog's nasty mouth has spread throughout your dog's body. So he put my dog, the moral of the story is he put my dog on antibiotics in order to try to reduce the heart murmur before he actually will clean his teeth. The reason why it matters is because he has to actually put the dog down, like put the dog on, like knock him out basically in order to clean his teeth. Cause that's what vets do, because so the dog doesn't bite them when they're cleaning the teeth. Anyways, all that to say is my dog's antibiotics have made his breath smell like just neutral. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my dog can lick my face and I no longer feel like the bacteria is eating my skin, because the stank just lingers with me for like 5 days. So it was bad, y'all. My dog's breath is bad. So if there is any takeaway from this favorite thing for someone, it would be to not take your dog's breath for granted. Brush that dog's teeth, get him chew toys, and if it's really bad, go get a professional to clean it and maybe put him on some antibiotics, because having a dog that doesn't have stanky breath is an awesome thing. It's my favorite thing.
All right. Well, I have 2, and one you can share and one you cannot.
Great.
So I'm going to start with the one you cannot. As you guys know from earlier in this show, I had an operation. The day of that operation, a text message came in from a coworker of mine, a picture of 2 6-packs of beer. And this lady said, hey, I had a party. I've had leftover beer. We're not going to drink it. It's just me and my husband. We don't really drink this stuff. It's left over. Do you want it? And I was like, sure, I'll take it. And it looked like 2 6-packs. So we make arrangements and plans, and my wife runs over there to her house to pick it up. It is 50 beers. I don't lie. And they're all craft beers. It is like 3-notched, 40-mile IPA, full Nelson, Champions shower beer. I'm going to be drinking these things on the podcast like for the next who knows how long until they're all gone. But I was just gifted 50 free craft beers, and I'm awesome. Over the moon excited. And you can't create that yourself. Sorry, unless you have a friend who has 50 beers they want to give away. You can't have yes, you can have my beers. I'm saying I'll share my beer, of course.
I thought you were saying I can't have your beer.
No. I mean, like, this is a favorite thing that someone else can't have.
I got you. No, I got you.
Because I'm not giving away these.
You can't have my beers.
You can come drink beers with me. Totally. That's fine. Let's go.
Yeah. We're supposed to get together and hang out after your procedure.
Well, I'm stocked. I am stocked. And that's one of my favorite things. My other favorite things is I got a crown.
Oh, yeah. It took me a second.
And I'm talking about
a crown in your mouth, like a teeth.
No,
tooth crown.
Fall Guys. The one thing in the world on the internet that matters right now is Fall Guys.
We
finally
streamed
got
it on our
crown.
last. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
We did stream it, and so that was probably 2 weeks by the time the show lands. And
I
by
got
the time
close.
the show goes live, everyone will have crowns.
The
But right
closest
now, I have a
crown-
crown, and
Closest,
you don't.
you do, and I don't. The closest, I mean, I got the crown for being level 5, but that doesn't count. The closest I got to a crown, I was literally the runner-up. Like, I was literally second place on the last game. It was so frustrating.
Oh my gosh.
It was the one where, like, the falling platforms, you have to try to stay, and yeah,
That's the one I won on.
Oh, nice. Good job. All right, cool. Well, then that's favorite things, which moves us to our last segment, which we're going to have to speed through, so I'm going to do the easy one instead of the hard one.
Ooh.
DLC stands for downloadable content and is a segment of our show where we have a fun mini discussion that may or may not be related to our main topic, but it's meant to be a conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games. So I said I'd do the easy one because it's not going to take as long to discuss. So DLC today is straightforward, connected to our topic, and should be a pretty straightforward answer. What is a superhero that you know in any existing form of media that does not currently have a video game that you would like to see a video game for? And brief explanation as to what that video game looks like. So I can go first because I've been thinking about it. But
yeah, I don't even know. You hit me on the spot. Yeah, go ahead.
I got you. So I was thinking, I don't think he may be in the fighting games, but I don't think there's an actual Ant-Man video game yet. And I think that now in the new, like, with the next gen consoles, now would be the perfect time. Because imagine like being able to shrink and grow big at will. And like how that changes the environment, like, but being able to load those assets.
Think
on the
about
right.
like the PlayStation 5 solid
yes,
state.
That's what I'm.
When
exactly
you go into the quantum realm and you just like bloop, whole other world, like
not
in
even
space.
the quantum realm, just in and out of like making things. Because again, the idea is that you could go big and like say X is go small and O is go big, and like just being able to like on the fly make like calculate where you are in the world, and so what needs to be like get bigger, what environment needs to get bigger, and what, because it would all be the environment, like your character would stay the same size, like fixed. The illusion would be they would make the environment around you bigger and the environment around you smaller, or normal sized. Like I think that would be entirely possible with the solid state drive. So you wouldn't even need to worry. I mean, the quantum realm would be being able to go there in and out at will, but like that was a whole different in the story. That was a whole different, like, it was basically an entirely different world. Like, interacting in the quantum realm. What I'm imagining is like, no, you're still fighting the same enemy, and you make him giant, or you make him tiny, or normal size, like at a press of a button, and like how that would affect like loading times and everything. Yeah, so that's my superhero that doesn't have a game. Yeah, so
I have a pseudo cop-out answer because you inspired me and I'm on the spot, and my mind went that way with Marvel and like all the extra like Avengers superheroes that don't really have games or representation. And I would love to see Scarlet Witch, a control type, like sci thriller, third person psychiatric, like move with all of her psych powers and like how she got them, maybe an origin story and some freak out scary stuff and like her whole arc. Because I don't know anything about her. I don't read the comics. I haven't seen her other than the Avengers movies. So like isn't she like Magneto's daughter or something?
She is in the comics. So again, because in the comics, Scarlet Witch. Or sorry, in the comics, the X-Men and the Marvel, like, again, it's all Marvel properties, so the X-Men are part of the Marvel universe. So yes, she is Magneto's daughter. In fact, one of my favorite comics is one called The House of M, where Scarlet Witch in the comics, they're not really specific in the MCU about what her powers are. In the comics, her powers are specific. She can alter reality. So
yes, that'd be such a good game.
In one of the comics, it's called House of M, and she freaks out. She has like a complete mental breakdown and changes all of reality. Like changes reality to a world where like Peter Parker's married to Gwen Stacy as opposed to Mary Jane, and Magneto is the ruler of the benevolent ruler of the world, and her and Quicksilver, like, it's crazy. She completely changes the entire universe. So like, not necessarily that, but the idea of her being able to warp reality would be great for like a Senua's Sacrifice style, like, like super power. Like, it's like I'm imagining something between like Control and Senua's Sacrifice, where there's still like a mental psychotic breakdown aspect of it, but you're the one controlling and altering a reality with your powers. Again, another one that would be perfect for the solid state drive.
I want it to be PT level scary, like terrifying.
Yeah.
I want it to be super dark and gritty and just like, there's we'll get into what type of games have been represented in superheroes, what genres have been represented and stuff. Scary games are not on that list. So this would be super unique. Mm-hmm. It would have like a terrifying, dark game. Because I've heard Senua's Sacrifice is pretty scary. I haven't played it, so I don't know.
Oh, it's so good, man. You need to.
So
I wish if I had a physical copy of it, I would lend it to you. I don't. So I can't.
I got Control on the way. So,
you do. You got Control. I'm proud of you. I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that's DLC. So we want to hear from you, from what you think what is a superhero. It can be from any. It doesn't even have to be like the Marvel and DC, like the mainstream. It could be from any of the like Dark Horse superhero, Dark Horse comics. It doesn't even have to be from comics, but it can be any superhero that you think you want to see a video game for that as of now you're not aware exists in video game form. So that is that. Where, Termite, can the listeners, Pod Smashers of the internet, interact with us if they so choose to?
Well, we are a weekly video game podcast that goes live every Monday at midnight, and you can find links to all of our podcast platforms, regardless of where you are listening to us right now, at 80bitpodsmash.com. That is our landing site with links to all of our platforms: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. We're all of our social media links are also in that webpage. So links to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a subreddit. All of those social media platforms, we are 80-bit Podsmash, 80-bit Podsmash. No uppercases, hyphens, or any other funny business. Just straight up. We also have a Discord server, and there's a link to that Discord server in all of our show notes on every single post, as well as our Facebook posts. You can find our Discord server there. And then on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Daylight Savings Time, we go live on twitch.tv/80-bit Podsmash, 80-bit Podsmash, and you can find us there. Like and subscribe us. Definitely subscribe to us on Twitch so that you are notified when we go live. Also pay attention to all of our social media feeds. We will let you know what we're going to be playing in advance before we go, and interact with us and let us know what you think. You have plenty. There's a plethora of places for you to interact with us and give us our feedback and questions. And one of the things that we need from you the most is an iTunes review or an Apple Podcast review.
Yeah. So
and we finally have one. We have one. And we promised our audience, we promised you guys that we would read whatever you put. We would read it on the show, except we are family friendly, so we might have to censor it if you get crazy, but this is your chance to troll us. It is your chance to we will read your review on this show. It doesn't matter how bad, how scathing, or how awesome or praiseworthy it is. But here it is. We finally have one. I'm going to let you take this away because I've been talking a lot. So
okay,
go ahead.
That's fine. So a 5-star review from JD Gross 8.
5 stars.
5
Rock
stars. On. Says, what a show. And then is the title. And then the body says, absolutely terrible. All they do is make Hamilton references and tell Termite not to mention Solid Snake every week, which I do. Don't mention Solid Snake. I'm glad you didn't say a superhero that I would love to see a video game for is Solid Snake. Joking. This is a great show if you're interested in gaming and its effects on society. This is definitely the podcast for you. The show also has personalities such as Hamilton references for us musical nerds, or Termite being obsessed with Solid Snake during DLC, which makes it really fun to listen to. Parentheses, Penguin needs to work on his Fall Guys gameplay, though. Termite was mostly able to keep up with me, but Penguin barely made it past...
crown.
Penguin made it barely past round 2. Come on, Penguin, get it together. End parentheses. Okay, so listen, bro, I got runner-up to a crown, so I have been working on my Fall Guy skills, and I'm still terrible. I am as terrible as our show. So that's it. That's the review. We will continue to read these until we start getting them in droves. So please feel free to, the gate has not closed on getting a review read. So please, we will read yours as well. So this is your chance again to troll us, to shame us, or to praise us. We'll read it and we will be humbled by your feedback. So thank you, JD Gross 820. For the nice review. So,
yes, thank you.
So cool.
We appreciate your review.
The main topic is superheroes and video games. So 40 minutes into the show, let's jump into it.
Hey, we have a lot of fun on this show, all right?
Yeah. We have a lot of fun.
Diametrically opposed foes.
We have a lot of fun talking about things we hate, like Epic Games and Apple.
Right.
All right, but not enough about that. Let's talk about superheroes. let's start at the very basics, at the very beginning. What is your favorite superhero / superhero group team up? And what is your preferred medium for superheroic stories? So this is just, let's start on the personal level. You can even, if you want to, share a little bit about like, what were the first superhero stories that you fell in love with, that kind of thing. So just in general, let's start there.
I was probably introduced to Batman first, but in my life, like in general, with the Mark Hamill Joker cartoon, like the original Batman cartoon was probably the first foray. Like, I don't know what it is. I have a 5-year-old who's never seen or heard of or did anything with Batman his whole entire life and knows who Batman is. I'm like, how? It's like every kid just knows inherently who Batman is, but he's not my favorite superhero.
Like Santa.
At all.
Santa and
yeah,
Batman.
it's just like this mystical like knowledge that just imputes into your genetics when you're born. Like you just know who Batman is. That's not my favorite superhero at all. In fact, I think he's kind of boring. My favorite superhero is actually Spider-Man.
You said Batman is boring? What is wrong with you?
He's I can definitely.
Anyway, I don't
want to defend that.
Relate with.
I want to talk about
Spider-Man. Yeah, talk about Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's amazing. So he's my favorite superhero. He is a regular, average Joe nerd. I related to him immediately, being a kind of a smart kid at school that was socially awkward and like bullied a little bit, and you know, like I got him. I understood.
In love with a girl way out of your league.
Yeah, like just crazy crushes. Like, what are you doing? You don't even got a chance.
If only she's
gorgeous
a bad guy would break through the window and take her, and then I would have to save her. Then she'd love me. Yeah, totally.
Right.
No,
you just earn her love through. Right. Yeah. So. Completely unexpected event of getting bit by a spider that has radioactive things in it as it was in a lab, and then like have all the crazy cool superhero, but his powers are awesome. And like, it's one thing to love, like I love teleportation and I love flight, but they're kind of cheats. They're like cheat codes, right? You just teleport wherever you want or like fly, and even super speed is kind of a cheat. Like it's a little nuts. Flash is kind of stupid. But Spider-Man has like that
real
good
quick, since
mix.
you brought it up. There is an argument to be made that super speed is the only power that matters. As in any world where there are speedsters, done. Because the ability to like contemplate faster than people as well as move faster means that like the argument was like
it's a cop out. It's cheap.
When fighting Superman, all the Flash has to do is scour the world in seconds, for someone's kryptonite, and then find it, bring it back to Superman before Superman can even throw a punch. Boom, he's done. Yeah, that's it.
It's dumb. That's why I was like, But I'm saying, like, I'm counteracting why I like Spider-Man so much, because Spider-Man has all the fun, like a flight. No, he web slings. Agility, he's really fast. Yes, he's really fast, but because he has like slightly elevated superhuman ability to like run and jump, that's kind of within the realm of possibility of maybe hitting him with a bullet if you're a good shooter. He's super strong,
but he's not Hulk strong. Like, he's super strong. He's not Superman strong. He's got the strength of a spider. He's got the proportional strength of a spider. So, like, strong, but not overpowered. So, I got it. He's got, like, a nice little... He's almost got, like, you might say, a Batman-style toolkit of powers, while also still having limitations. No, I will agree with you. So, I will say I can't remember, because I always grew up around superheroes, whether cartoons or Friends, comics, and even games. But so I would say that the most formative ones growing up, it would probably be either X-Men or Spider-Man that
me too,
that I was exposed to first. And then Batman was probably Batman was the DC side of same thing, animated series. Growing up, I would definitely say Spider-Man is my favorite. And for the similar reasons of, like, I just identified with Peter Parker. You know what I mean? Like, that's that's honestly, like, Spider-Man himself as a superhero is okay. But it's just that, I mean, it's Peter Parker's story. I get same complete thing where I like grew up being like, I have a crush on these girls way out of my league, but if I was Spider-Man, they'd love me. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Just, picked on nerd, but, thought myself special, all that. So all that I like resonated with me, growing up as a kid. So, I would say though that my favorite superhero from a pure like superheroic power standpoint is, I disagree with you. I think teleportation is just the coolest thing in the world. So Nightcrawler was always my favorite X-Men, and I love the short range, the blinking, but like one of the single best action sequences in any movie is Nightcrawler's quote assassination of the president in X-Men 2 is still visually
oh my gosh,
cinematographically, if I were teaching like cinematography or even fight scenes, I would show that scene off at the beginning of every class. Just be like, this is the pinnacle. So, yeah, huge fan of Nightcrawler. My tastes have changed, though, as an adult. So as much as I love Spider-Man, I have become very much a fan of the Hulk in a way that I wasn't as a kid. Yeah, no, I just like I didn't care for the Hulk at all as a kid. He's this big, dumb, angry man. But I love the notion of like he gets stronger the angrier he gets. Is just fantastic. And Mark Ruffalo did a lot to change my mind on the Hulk, like his performance of the Hulk in the Avengers, and Joss Whedon's writing. Just like the Hulk is probably my favorite Avenger. So, yeah, there's that.
Okay.
So favorite superhero group. So this can be Justice League. It can be X-Men, Avengers. It can be Suicide Squad. What's your favorite? It could even be, I would say it could even be Suicide Squad. What's your favorite team up?
The team up I always loved was the episodes of the Spider-Man cartoon where he teamed up with the X-Men. And it was wrapped up in like the Apocalypse and what's Cable and all the, like, I don't know the details of those stories anymore because they're so, I haven't been involved in that world. I know the movies tried to do some of that and did terribly. And that's why I loved Spider-Man being in the Avengers and the newest stuff, especially the Iron Spider. I flipped out when I saw that Iron Spider suit.
Yeah, they finally did it. I've been wanting them to do that for years. Ever since I knew the Civil Iron Spider was a thing. Yeah.
Yep. I'm so into that. So like, yeah, Spider-Man and X-Men were my favorite superhero groups. And that actually trickles into video games a little bit. There's Street Fighter versus X-Men I always thought was really, really fun. And then, of course, Marvel versus Capcom, where you can be and then there was like a whole fighting game of X-Men versus Street Fighter that had a whole like collection of X-Men fighters that then once Marvel versus Capcom 2 came out, they kind of brought all those, not all of them, but most of those fighters forward. So then you could have all the X-Men with Spider-Man and the Avengers all in like one. So like the Marvel superhero group together is awesome. So I'm into all that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know. It's hard because I wrote this question, but it's hard. It's like picking your favorite child. Like there's so many good superhero and anti-hero team ups. Yeah, I don't know if I can pick them. I will say I am very fond of the X-Men, and I'm very fond of the original Avengers group, like the group of original Avengers in the movie. I think that the Avengers is probably my favorite superhero movie, the first one. Mostly because I'm a huge Joss Whedon fan, and I love his writing, and I love what he put into that, making that movie what it was. So just that group of Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Captain America, and then Black Widow and Hawkeye are just like creme fraiche for me.
Yeah.
So I'm like racking my brain because I'm like, I know there are superhero team ups or groups that I love that I'm blanking on that are just like the bomb. But
another video game that really plays with this idea is the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, because you can pick your own like group together from across different Marvel things. And we'll get there, but I love the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games for that reason. You can make your own kind of like dream team ups. Mm-hmm. It's kind of fun.
So Coon and Friends or Hero Pals or whatever they're called.
I've only watched that once, and I don't remember the details enough to make that decision right now.
Freedom Pals, that's what they're called, Freedom Pals.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Have you ever taken a quiz online about what superhero are you?
There's... like BuzzFeed or Instagram.
Yeah, sure. I don't care. Whatever. Like, have you ever taken one?
Sure, of course I've taken them. I don't know if I trust the results. Why?
Yeah, but what results have you gotten? Do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure I've gotten.
Do you know who I always get?
Who do you always? You always get.
Guess.
Captain America.
My personality. Yep, that's it. Captain America. Yeah. Like, man, like I understand why my
Captain
personality
America's
lines
great.
up.
Captain America is fantastic. Yeah. All right, cool. What's the last part of this question was, what is your preferred medium? Do you prefer comics, movies, or video games, or another medium for superhero stories?
It's hard to say. Growing up, I liked the cartoons. I always thought if you were a purist, you'd read the comics. So like I have respect for comic book readers because that's like where it originated from. And like a movie or a cartoon is usually a recreation from a comic book or some other medium. And then lastly, video games. It's like, is a video game based on a movie, which we saw 1,000. We'll get into like the terrible like superhero video games that are based on the movies, which the movies are based on the comics or based on it's horrible, right? So my preferred medium is usually, if you were to give me an objective question, where would you prefer to get your stuff from, your stories? I would always go back to the original source. And like, I always want to go back to but I don't always do that. I just prefer to Game of Thrones being an example, I will never read Game of Thrones. I've watched it, but I will never read it. It's too much.
Song of Ice and Fire. Okay, just Game of Thrones is just the title of the first book.
It's a really long and okay. A really long answer is I want to say movies.
Okay,
the modern since Iron Man to now,
MCU,
but even
Marvel
even
Marvel
Nolan's Batman movies. Christopher Nolan's Batman movies are awesome.
Great.
Right?
Well, first two. The last one kind of phoned it in.
You gotta finish. You gotta have the whole set. You gotta identify the whole movie. Like you can't just pick one. Yes, you can say one of them is a favorite.
I would say Dark Knight. I would just watch Dark Knight
but
without watching any of the other ones, but that's just me. No, I'm with you. I was not a huge comic kid. Like I didn't collect comics.
Same here. Yeah.
I didn't. But I did read them occasionally, and when I did, I loved them. I loved it. Especially when they had the collections where they put them all in one quote graphic novel, but it was multiple volumes. Just amazing because I like just reading the consecutive story. But
that's it. You've helped me figure it out. Yeah. I didn't read comic books because they were like magazines.
Yeah.
And you would miss some. Yep. And you had to keep the subscription live. And you couldn't jump in midway. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted the whole set.
I'm glad
you just
I'm
helped
here
me figure out the barrier of entry for Termite for comic books.
This has been happening recently where I just give you a revelation and you're like, you have made the world make sense to me. So you're welcome for being your views, I guess. Anyways.
Yep.
Comic books, when I have read them, have been great. But again, they're huge. What I don't like about them is they're a huge investment. And they require work to keep up with them, as you kind of hinted at. Mm-hmm. So, in that regard, I always thought that television was a really great medium for superhero stories that was not utilized nearly as effectively as it could have been. But then recently, I've been getting burned out faster on so when the TV shows started happening, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and they were doing crossover stuff that I had wanted. I was into it, but then they just kept going with it, and I just got kind of burned out on it. I got burned out on the superhero stuff on television first, more so than movies and more so than any other medium. So, I don't know, man. I like the movies and I like the cinematic universe and everything, but I can't say that I don't like the long waits between the movies. You know what I mean? Long. Right. So I'm torn. I don't know what medium does it well. I love superhero video games, but even those are almost always limited in scope. Very few crossovers, if any. Which is that's so I think that comics. I do, I hate to just come back to the purest answer, but genuinely, comics did it right because again, you don't have to worry about licensing issues, who has the rights to what. Right. It's just, hey, I want the Human Torch and Spider-Man to race in this episode, or in this episode, in this comic, so let's make it happen. So I think that comics are probably the best medium for those stories.
That's where the most creative freedom happens.
Exactly. And where they get the kind of the coolest things happening. So I regretfully haven't had enough exposure to it. So cool. Let's talk about video games though. We're a video game podcast, and so an hour into our show, let's talk about video games. What are some of the hits and misses of superhero video games, and why do superheroes work well in video? Why do those games
I think
do they go together like peanut butter and jelly? Do they go together like peanut butter and chocolate? Let's talk about it.
Let's answer the second half of your question before we dive into actual titles. Let's talk about why superheroes work so well in video games. The abilities, the supernatural aspect of the creative fun you can have. Superheroes are fun. Their powers are fun, and that easily translates very well into something a player can engage with and have agency over and experience that same kind of thrill and fun that the actual superheroes go through when they first get their powers. And so I think
they're colorful. They're especially because again, they come from comics, which is a medium that by in and of itself is inherently a colorful medium. You don't think of a comic and think of some gray and black, dreary military shooter, though they exist. You usually think of Superman with his red underwear, throwing a green truck at a bad guy or whatever. I think actually he's usually lifting it off the good guys or the civilians, but nevertheless, color, bright. They're so when you take that into a video game, they're fun to, they're fun to design and they're fun to play from the sheer color of it. But you're right. The idea of abilities and powers lend themselves to what video games in many ways do best, which is the power fantasy, which we talked about before, where it's you want to get stronger, you want to get better. And you want to unlock more powers and more abilities and capabilities. So superheroes lend themselves to that quite elegantly.
And we've talked about how like video game mechanics, as far as like what you just said, abilities, character building, even down to numbers and RPGs, like originated from Dungeons and Dragons. And so you would build a wizard, and that wizard or she would have, like all kind of different abilities. You could customize and choose what you wanted. That same kind of root element in like building and growing something fantastical translates really well to video games.
Dungeons wizards. And Dragons, video games are just
so well with superheroes.
Like, you're like, I want to make a game, and I want it to design a game that has a wizard from D&D, like a wizard-esque style character from D&D, but I want to set it in modern times with school buses and airplanes and skyscrapers. Like, boom, you're talking about a superhero game. You know what I mean? Right. Like in some way or another. It's superheroes are often identified as well. Like the other elements of superheroes beyond just the superpowers themselves are secret identities, colorful costumes, and stuff like that. Like those also are kind of part of what we perceive superheroes as. But they can have them or not. I immediately think of like a game like Prototype. Did you ever play Prototype? Yeah,
I know what it is. I never played it.
It's kind of a superhero game. It's a little bit darker superhero game, but it's got that same kind of vibe. And yeah, I mean, he doesn't have like a secret identity or a costume. I don't know about Infamous if he does or not.
Nope and nope.
Yeah, but like again, especially when you're especially when you're talking about adaptation games that are adaptations of existing superhero stories. Like, yeah, of course. I mean, they're fun to design. Everyone wants to make the game where they like, oh, I'm enabling players to really like have the experience of being Spider-Man or being Superman. Like, of course, everyone wants to design that game. So I would say some of the, I didn't really ask this question, but some of the pitfalls of superhero games where they can be limited. Stories almost always, like superhero stories, you're seeing this now in like the mainstream, like cinema media, where it's like, there's only so much depth that you can have in that story because superhero stories tend to have a very specific formula. Like guy or girl gets powers, guy or girl figures out how to use those powers to help others. Guy or girl encounters a enemy that challenges them. Guy or girl overcomes those challenges and saves the day. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the formula that they follow. They usually almost always have to have a character that ultimately you side with. So it's harder to explore moral ambiguity. It's harder to explore things like mental illness or psychosis, kind of things that we've been talking about, things that we like when games explore them. Like it's much harder to necessarily weave those themes. Not impossible, but harder to do so. And that goes across all superhero media. I remember like the new Fantastic Four movie that came out like 4 or 5 years ago, and like it was a reboot of it, and like Josh Trank was the director, and he was trying to like make some Cronenbergian sci-fi horror. And like before the movie even came out, people were like, you can't do that because like part of what makes that like Cronenbergian is like a very specific kind of like horror like director from like I want to say like the 70s or 80s or something like that. But like all of his horror was like this mind-bending sci-fi, almost Lovecraftian sci-fi, and like you can't do that when you also have to have superheroes that people like and identify with and care for and also want to succeed and win. So it was like, no, like you're trying to make the wrong story. So it's not impossible, but it is difficult and challenging. So I would venture to guess that superhero video games often have that problem when it comes to like making interesting stories.
Yeah. And then like, what about the movie Joker? Like that, even in movies in Hollywood, we're starting to see that now more like mental health, illness, kind of dark. I mean, even Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's Joker, right? Lots of
but they're villains.
The depths and like, yeah, it's true.
And then so you're talking about when you're
Batman himself in that whole Batman Begins and like the trauma he is going through and like what he did with the assassin's name I can't remember and like all the way
Shadows,
through.
Bro.
Yeah,
no, but like you still have to like.
We're starting to see it's new.
You can't. No, you're right. Society. They're doing more morally gray stories and they are figuring it out. But when you use your first example is Joker, and it's like, well, of course, like that is an interesting twist on the idea of like now they're making a movie where you identify with the super villain, or not super in this case, but you're identifying with the villain. Right. So there is that aspect of like, well, that's that's a little bit more of an interesting story because you're able to turn it on its head. So that would be a video game I would like to see. Like, make a Magneto video game, but make me side with Magneto. Like, make me identify with and understand Magneto. That would be sweet. So game developers, yeah.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks.
You heard it here first.
I want royalties.
So, all right, cool. Let's blast through. You made a huge list, so let's blast through. What are some video games that work well and video games that work bad? Yeah, but we could, us, we could take each and every one of these things on this list and like talk about it ad nauseum.
Yeah.
So let's just briefly talk about what we like about these games.
Yep. So I didn't. These are not in any particular order, but they are kind of stretched across different genres. I tried to pick from different genres and different time frames of video games. So first on the list, Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I already alluded to it. It's an ARPG, top-down co-op, kind of like Diablo or Dungeons or the Baldur's Gate style, except way faster paced and way less complicated. Where you could choose your own superhero group ups and like work together, combine abilities, and just beat them up. It's fun. You just go through a linear story and it has lots of dialogue and fun. But next, the Batman Arkham series, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Knight, sorry. Those three games revolutionized and changed what superhero video games could accomplish. The battle system, the stealth system, exploration, the stories being told, dark, gritty, relatable. You feel emotions. It just like awesome. Those are like probably, if I had to like put best superhero games of all time, I would put the Batman Arkham series pretty high on that list, specifically Arkham Asylum. Going back in some retro, Spider-Man 2, which was based on the movie, Sam Raimi's suit, like Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock.
Can I just throw out here, by the way?
Yeah, what's up?
If you are a fan of, I'm making this argument here, I'm staking my reputation on it. If you're a fan of the existing superhero movies, if you're like, oh, MCU is great, I'm going to say that you have two movies to thank for the MCU being successful, and they are X-Men 2 and Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
those movies,
I love those movies.
As much flack that as like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man gets, as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man gets, like the
Spider-Man 2 is amazing.
Spider-Man 2, it proved that they could take not only like adapt the comics well, but also and still be successful, but also a sequel. They could do it again. They could do it with a sequel, and the sequel would be as impactful and important. That was like the foundation for what would eventually become the Marvel Cinematic Universe. X-Men did the same thing. So anyway, sorry. Throwing that out there. I'm done. I'm done there.
Yep. So moving forward, obviously we have Marvel Spider-Man for PS4, which if you boil down what Spider-Man on PS4 is, it draws all of its combat from Batman Arkham and its influence. And
in fact, so playing that game made me want to go back because of people drawing that parallel. Made me want to go back and play the Arkham games to figure out. I never ended up beating the first one, and I regret it because I think I would have been happier as a person if I had.
You should. Yeah,
if I played the others.
Going even farther, retro back. Batman Returns is a side-scroll and beat-em-up game on Super Nintendo and Genesis. For some reason, that game stands out to me, and I was validated by looking up some lists online. And it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up game, kind of like Streets of Rage or Final Fight, like those kind of arcadey, like punch, 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 and they have a health bar, it goes down. But it just captured like the essence of the movie really well. And in the movie Batman Returns wasn't what's his face, Tim Burton involved?
I believe so.
And and it has that vibe, like that kind of creepy, sort of darkish vibe. I don't know, it was really good. And the game really captured it well. It was a lot of fun. Then going into the GameCube era, like Beautiful Joe. I don't know if you ever played that. Totally original IP, side-scrolling, cel-shaded, crazy, like fast-paced beat-em-up game. Platforming also really, really fun. It's actually a title I don't own and wish I had a copy of. If you have a chance to go check out Beautiful Joe and you like superheroes, do it. Because he's all like flashy and he's on film. And so like some of the mechanics of the game are about like capturing certain scenes correctly. And it's great. I love that game. X-Men 2 on the Sega Genesis was one of the first like X-Men games that I really loved on the console at home. I remember you could play different superheroes, specifically Gambit in the snow level. You could like throw your cards and like use your staff, and it was really fun. Platforming, beat 'em up stuff. X-Men, the Konami arcade. This was the 6-player co-op, like massive arcade cabinet that if an arcade had it, it's usually front and center and everyone's crowded around it.
I was going to say no one, it's never free. You're never able to play it because there's a line for it.
Super fun. That's one of the best arcade games out there. It's amazing. And that's superheroes. The Infamous series across PlayStation 3 and PS4. There's 3 entries, 1, 2, and Second Son with some spin-off games. Totally new original IP. It's not based on a comic book. Took a real life situation and made a superhero in it. And so it isn't like tights and colors. It's real life dude who has to, and there's a morality scale of good and bad. So it's exploring those kind of ideas and gray areas of what superheroes go through. Fantastic. If you love third person open area exploration type games like Ghost of Tsushima, go back and play Infamous because it's a lot of fun. And a fighting game, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3, which I talked about earlier, like crazy combination of fighters. It was before Smash Bros. The first game came out, and it was what we love about Smash Bros. In the Nintendo universe, but applied to comic books and Capcom games in general. So Street Fighter and Bionic Commando and X-Men and Street Fighter. Like I said that already, but it's fine. That's awesome. I love those fighting games. They're great. I put South Park, The Fractured But Whole in here because they spoof superheroes.
Yeah,
and it's totally a superhero game.
It's totally
but it's a tactical RPG.
Yeah.
And how unique is that? Like, it is a cartoon show that is spoofing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and grabbing the elements of tactical RPG using Obsidian as a developer. Fantastic game. Please go check that game out. It is so unique and very adult, but very superhero and super fun. And then I put DC Universe Online on this list as an MMO representation of what superheroes can do, because that's still going and it's relevant. Like it has a following and it's across all the platforms. It's on PS4, it's on PC, Xbox One. So DC Universe Online, never played it, but it's one of the hits of the video games, superhero video games. And then lastly, but definitely not least, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time is probably my single favorite arcade game of all time, and I haven't played it in like 20 years because it doesn't exist anywhere anymore, and it's sad.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are they superheroes? I don't know, but I'll allow
Sure.
it. Yeah, I'll allow
They started as comic books. They're mutant ninja turtles.
I got you.
They have ninja
with
powers.
You. I'm not disagreeing.
Super strength and stuff. Yeah.
I do want to add Saints Row on there as well.
Ooh,
because
good pull.
Saints Row exactly. Saints Row is not only was the comedy like South Park level, like par of just over the top ridiculous, but like the gameplay was very superheroes, and like it was like basically superheroes and sci-fi and ridiculous over the top crazy story. But like the gameplay was kind of like just an over the top version of Grand Theft Auto. Like if you could in Grand Theft Auto jump over buildings in a single bound, that is Saints Row. So great game to check out. Cool. We are running out of time, so let's move on. There were some misses, but we're gonna have there have been plenty of misses.
About one.
There have been more. One. Sure, that's fine.
We have had talk about one.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Go ahead. One miss.
The literal worst video game of all time happens to be a superhero video game, and that is Superman for the N64. And I had to pull this quote because it perfectly articulates how bad this game is. And it's a quote from ScreenRant.com: "Worst superhero video games ever. This game is legendarily bad. Titus Software's Superman game is so notoriously terrible that it's become shorthand for a game that does everything wrong from the ground up. The story of the game is that Lex Luthor has trapped you, Superman naturally, in a virtual version of Metropolis and is forcing you to take part in asinine tasks like flying through colored rings or finding your way out of a maze. If that wasn't enough to get your pulse racing, how about the fact that Superman controls like an errant shopping cart, or the fact that everything is so muddy and awful that it's hard to tell where anything is or what you're meant to do? According to producer Eric Kine, many of the game's limitations, such as the virtual world setting, goes down to DC and WB's refusal to let Superman punch and kick, quote, real people. No matter what the backstory is, the cold hard truth of all of it is Superman 64 sucks and is easily the worst superhero video game ever made. Fingers crossed it isn't beaten out anytime soon."
Nice. Nice.
Really
so
bad.
That is one great example of the fact there have been plenty, especially like you mentioned, superhero video games that are just shameless adaptations of movies that are shameless adaptations of comics. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, even if those movies are good, you've got things like Iron Man 2 here, you've got The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like, these are games in a lot of ways that are based off of the movies of the same titles, and they tend to be very bad, with some exceptions. There are some exceptions. We had like Spider-Man 2 that was based off of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. That was great.
Right, and that was good, yep.
Yeah, so there was
a swath of like, there was a dark ages of superhero games for the PS3 and Xbox 360 outside of like Marvel Ultimate Alliance. There was a slew of them, and they're like a bunch of X-Men games, X-Men Destiny. There was Thor, God of Thunder, Batman Dark Tomorrow, Iron Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and the lists go on. They're just terrible. Like, you can go to GameStop and find them for $1. They're always thrown into like these collections for nothing because they reviewed horribly, and they were all just shameless cash grabs and weak stories and worthless.
Yeah, so I mean, it really is.
Now
it really
we're
is
spinning out of that now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it really is hit or miss. Like, I mean, not that there aren't very good superhero games out there, and not that there aren't very good superhero games that are based off of great IPs. In fact, they just announced Rocksteady. Rocksteady's doing that.
Yes, doing Suicide Squad.
They're doing Suicide Squad.
Yes.
Yeah, which sounds
I can't wait.
Awesome, but it could all, again, just because I'm naturally skeptical. It could also be really bad, just because superhero games don't have a great track record, especially ones that are adapted. Rocksteady does have a great track record. Yeah. But they, when they're good, they're good. And what I've noticed is that oftentimes the ones that don't have existing IPs are also great. In fact, wouldn't you, if correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't you count Ratchet and Clank as a superhero game?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely, because he's part of a group of superheroes that save the galaxy and protect the galaxy. So yeah, I mean,
was it like
almost
the Q Squad or something
like that? But like literally, the Captain Quark or whatever is he's like a kind of he's the bad guy / anti-villain or whatever that you fight. And so it's great. So there are a lot of great original IPs out there. I had other questions, but I'm going to cut them all and get to the meat of this. Let's talk about what is superhero fatigue, and does it affect your enjoyment of does it affect your enjoyment of superhero media? Let's start there.
Superhero fatigue for me is only a barrier of entry. And I say this because you talked about this TV like stuff on Netflix and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the movies. And it took me a long time to get through it, but I have seen all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and TV stuff, with the exception of one season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Inhumans. The show Inhumans I have not watched. But every time I go to start something new, I'm like, I don't want to start another superhero thing. But then when I get into it, I'm like, I'm in. Like, Iron Fist was the prime example of that. I knew nothing about who Iron Fist was. I didn't know anything of the backstory. I just knew he was part of this new thing called the Defenders, which is it's new to me, not new to the comic book world. But I knew it was like coming. And like, okay, Netflix is going to do this whole like, I really, really loved Daredevil. And I knew Punisher was out there, and that was kind of crazy. And Jessica Jones was great. She was new to me as well. And Luke Cage is fantastic. But then Iron Fist came, and I was like, I don't know anything about it. He's just a boring white dude. What do I care? And I jumped into it, and it's probably one of my favorite next to Daredevil.
You're
and
insane.
Luke Cage. Like,
you're a madman.
I love Iron Fist. And only because it blew away my expectations so much, because everyone trashed it. Everyone said it was terrible. It was the worst one of the whole series. And I'm like, okay. So I went in with full superhero fatigue, and it did not affect my enjoyment of that show at all. In fact, it set the bar so low that when I watched it, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of the same, because people always bash that show too. It has its ups and downs, but I absolutely love it, and I think it's fantastic. And so, like,
okay, all right, endless optimist.
Yeah,
I asked this question because it's a cynical question. All right, so the idea of superhero fatigue comes from the fact. So, without getting too deep into literally at the end of the episode, so I don't have time to get into the history of it. But it kind of comes from this idea that, like, before the year 2000, there was the kinds of movies that succeeded in the box office were things like romantic comedies and raunchy comedies, romantic comedies.
But like those teen movies,
Oscar bait dramas too,
stuff?
Like the deep kind of like Oscar drama things, like those all those movies did super well. Like, I think before the major change in blockbusters, like one of the best selling movies of all time was like Titanic.
Right.
So I mean, before that was like the 90s. In the 80s, you had like 80s action movies and slasher movies, 80s horror movies and stuff like that. Like, those are kind of what were popular. So like, tastes in movies, of course, change over time, but 2001 heralded a major shift in what movies would be, and that was the release of The Lord of the Rings. And when the massive success of The Fellowship of the Ring swept over the world, it changed what movies became successful, and it suddenly became about adaptations. And eventually, eventually it was inevitable they would adapt superhero movies, which, again, had been adapted all throughout the 80s and 90s, but were never mainstream successes until X-Men, Spider-Man, and then eventually the Batman movies and Iron Man. And those amazing, great movies kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all that stuff, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. The problem is, it became oversaturated, like massively oversaturated. And we're getting to the point now where I'll speak for myself and just say, like, I thought Infinity War was a great way to... Infinity War and Endgame were a great way to finally put a bow on, like, okay, we did it. We did the thing. We did the massive, giant crossover, billion-dollar movie with all building up over a decade's worth of stories, like, to tying it all together, and we completed it, right? Like, we're done. No. Now, phase 4 Marvel, phase 5 Marvel, whole different. Now the Avengers are like, it's a whole different group of Avengers. And it's just like, do we need to? Like, of course we need to. We need to, because we, Disney, need to make money. And they will. Right. They absolutely will. 100%. But my enjoyment of superhero movies superhero stories in general is starting to wane. As I mentioned before, like a colleague of mine just got really into the DC Arrowverse, on the CW, and there's so many, there's so many shows you have to watch. Like you said, that barrier of entry is like it started with Arrow and Flash, and then it was like Legends of Tomorrow. Now there's Supergirl, Batgirl, Black Lightning. They're all
Gotham.
I think there was a crossover with Gotham. So it's just like, it's too much. Like you said, the barrier of entry is a huge turnoff for a lot of these shows. Keeping up with it, whether there's dips in quality, the fact that you kind of have to keep up with it, whether there's dips in quality or not, or else you're going to be lost later down the road. That can cause superhero fatigue, and just the general feeling of like these are being done too much. The formulas, again, it suffers from the same idea of that formula that I talked about, where it's like, you have to start with an origin story. Once you've done the origin story, you have to move on to like just go through the rogues gallery. And every time the superhero is going to win, they're going to be successful. Even when there's massive twists, like at the end of Infinity War, that the heroes are going to pull it together and save the day. Why do we know this? Because Spider-Man Far From Home has already been advertised, so we know that Spider-Man comes back. You know what I mean? Like, you can't there's only so much you can do with these stories. There's only so many twists and only so many shocking moments that you can do. So it's, in my mind, starting to become repetitive. That said, I still enjoy superhero video games. Like, I'm stoked about Miles Morales. I'm not so burned out on Spider-Man that I will pass up on a great game that I know will be fun and amazing. So, that's just for me.
I'm super intrigued with the Avengers game. I want to see the reviews. I want to see how it's received. I want to see how quick the content can be.
Get in on the beta this weekend.
Through. Maybe if I had time to actually play, I might, but my wife's school runs out this week. And so like she'll be in the evening and she's waiting to like hang out, and I'll be healed up and ready to go, and probably not going to play a lot of games this weekend. Unfortunately, it's bad timing for Avengers, but good timing for me. I'm just interested in it. I want to see more about how the general gaming community receives the Avengers, but my skepticism, I am the eternal optimist. I am skeptical of the Avengers game because I'm afraid it's just going to be what Destiny was.
I'm getting very Anthem vibes from it too.
Yes, Anthem is the more modern example. Yes, you're right. I should have said that.
It kind of looks attractive, but all the systems in the game scream tedious, boring, repetitive. Yep. So, and that seems to be a lot of what the reviews.
I play superhero games for their stories.
Right.
That story is kind of the main thrust for me with a superhero video game.
Speaking of superhero games, Anthem could be argued as a superhero game, but going on.
It could be. So all the rest of the stuff about the game needs to kind of support the story and be fun to play and have good mechanics and like have a good gameplay loop and all that stuff to kind of accentuate the story. Whereas I feel like the Avengers, this new game, is going to have a very shallow story, very quick. Each hero has like a set of missions that you can do together as friends, but everything is going to be about the end game grind. What kind of what kind of gear can you get? How can you customize your hero? And what group settings are you going to have together to complement each other for the raid bosses? And then you just grind out to get better gear, to get the better bosses, to get the better gear, to get the better bosses. And like, for me, The Division is an example of a game that works for. Like that system makes sense for me in a game. Like, I don't care about the story of The Division at all for some reason, even though I love stories in video games. But with superhero games, it needs to have like a good comic book kind of line of story, and that's kind of unknown right now with the Avengers.
Right. No, I'm with you.
Video game. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we had more questions, but we're going to end there. I will say one final tiny note before we end is a game I forgot to mention that hasn't been mentioned yet, that I hope there's someone out there listening to this that is screaming.
Breath of the Wild.
It's another Breath of the Wild, the best superhero game of all time. No, there was a Ultimate Spider-Man game, and I don't remember if it was 1 or 2, but Ultimate Spider-Man was like an offshoot of the comics. And the one game I'm thinking about in particular, I'm only bringing it up because of the mechanic. You could play, like, half the game you play as Spider-Man, and the other half you play as Venom. And the mechanic they had for Venom was one of the most interesting, clever mechanics I've ever seen in a video game, especially a superhero one, because when you were playing as Venom, your health would constantly tick down unless you went around and consumed random civilians. So you had to like go and just like eat people as Venom in order to keep your health bar from constantly ticking down.
Was this a PS2 Xbox era game?
I want to say I played it. It was, I don't know, man. I'll have to look it up, but...
I'm seeing one now that's at the PS2 Xbox GameCube generation, and it's called Ultimate Spider-Man. But
yeah, that might be it.
I think I was
playing it on GameCube, so that might be it. But
yeah.
All right, cool. That's all. That was the last thing I wanted to add. So, what are your thoughts on superhero stories, on superhero movies? What are your favorite superheroes? What are your favorite superhero stories, games? Do you think do you agree with the idea of superhero fatigue? Are you fatigued on superheroes? We want to hear your thoughts. So, Termite, where can they share their thoughts on the entire episode with us? Take it away.
The quick answer, 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website with all of our links to our podcast that goes live every Monday at midnight. And if you want to interact with us more, you can go to our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. We have a subreddit where we'll have a topic for this episode created upon the launch of the episode for you to go in and interact. And if you want a more conversational experience, you can hit our Discord server. The link to that server is in all of our show notes and our Facebook posts. And ultimately, you can find us on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, where we are streaming something fun that we want to play. Maybe someone will play the Avengers on a live stream sometime, and you can jump in and see how that's going to go. So you can interact with us, ask your questions, interact with our community as well. So there you go.
Cool. Awesome. Next week, we do have an episode on the docket, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready to announce it because it could change. Subject to change because it requires me to talk to someone I haven't talked to yet. So,
all right.
So we will just let it be a surprise for you next week.
See you next week.